Hi, my friend. You are going to freaking love this episode. We're really diving deep, and I mean deep, 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 deep into how to rebuild that connection with not just your body's wisdom when it comes to food, but also to your intuition so that making daily decisions about your own life starts to feel easy and intuitive instead of constantly banging your head against the wall and wondering what is the quote unquote right way to do something or the right decision. Trust me, this is something that I had to learn how to decondition from my system, my brain, my body, which is to always look outwards and to always look at what are other people doing, what are other people saying, what is the right way, and to compare and to copy. And at the end of the day, and what you're really going to walk away with from this conversation with Cassandra is that there is no one size fits all approach to health, to nutrition, to movement, to self-care, to sleep, to career, to relationships, like none. And the more you learn your own code, your own system, your own design, the more you're going to feel lit up by your life and you're going to feel in alignment, right? Like we've all had those experiences where we're either in a relationship, maybe it's a romantic relationship or a friendship, where it just doesn't feel good. And you walk away from those interactions feeling drained or bad about yourself, or you feel like having to see those people is an obligation, but you don't feel lit up or excited by it. That is an example of your body communicating with you. And oftentimes what we end up doing is we force through it because maybe it's been something that's been part of our life for so long, a job, a relationship, a pattern that's just been there for so long. And your body, your intuition, your wisdom is constantly communicating with you. And that art of being able to not just learn how to listen, but to understand those signals and honor those signals and build up evidence that you can trust yourself, all of that is going to come in this conversation. You're going to walk away with literally practical strategies that you can start implementing right away. So a little bit about our amazing guest. We are joined by Cassandra Bodziak. She's a mindfulness author, an actress, a holistic wellness guide known for helping soul-led women design lives that support their energy, purpose, and expansion. She has an amazing book that just came out, The Mindful Table, where she blends meditation and affirmations and recipes and healing your relationship with food and your body all in one. And I just loved this conversation because we were able to dive deep and go beyond the conversation around like listen to your hunger and listen to your fullness and get clearer on the nuances of food choices and what's going to help you feel good and learning how your intuition speaks to you specifically, because the way it speaks to me is going to be different from you and from Cassandra. And so it was a beautiful conversation. So without further ado, let's play that conversation with Cassandra. Welcome to the Live Unrestricted podcast, a show where you'll learn how to heal your relationship with food and your body so that you can focus your time and energy on more important things like your personal growth. I'm your host, Sabrina Magna, food freedom coach, and my mission is to help make your life happier and healthier without stress, overwhelm, or guilt about food. If you love the show, please do go out and share it. And if you're looking for support with your relationship with food, details about my programs are in the show notes. Thanks for spending time with me today. Now let's jump in. How did you get into this, and what prompted you to want to get into the blending of spirituality, intuition, healing your relationship with food and your body?
Yeah. So I really just happened to me. I didn't like seek it out. I had always had a charged relationship with my body growing up. It's funny because I'm 5'8", which I don't
Same.
really feel like is like tall, right? Like, but growing up, like I joke that I feel like I came out of the womb 5'8", because, in elementary school, I remember just like always being the tall girl. And I think that was like part of it. Like, I just thought I was like this big girl, right? And it made me so uncomfortable in my body from a pretty young age. And a lot of things would like come up. And then once I started into middle school and high school, you go through puberty, all of a sudden you care a little bit more about what you look like. Those like kind of lights are turning on. And I was going into acting. I started acting in middle school. And when I was I did all the school plays, and we lived close to New York. So I would go into New York to film things. And being in that industry, I think even amplified it even more, because I was like, I need to look good out in front of camera. I need to like, that's like a competitive edge or whatever. And it became this ongoing noise that was like always in my head of like over exercising, trying every single supplement. A lot of the supplements I was taking probably weren't inherently bad, but it was just like the energy at which I was taking it with was like, nah, okay. And then I end up in college and I'm getting a BFA in acting. I'm in a hyper competitive conservatory program where they only accept like 12 of us. And it amplified, amplified, amplified. And I think the majority of the women in my program are also struggling with similar things. And so I was over exercising, I was under eating, and I started getting really sick. And when I was about 21, it was not like, I mean, now I'm like, I don't think it was connected, but in my head, I felt like it was like some karmic retribution, because I knew I had been very mean to my body. And I was intellectually aware that what I was doing was like not cool, right? And so it was like I would get these like full blown torso pains, like my whole torso would lock up. And I choreographed and I did dance, and my whole life was just like a fun thing, not like a professional endeavor. And I stopped being able to dance. I struggled to walk across campus to get to my next class. And that was kind of when what I call like my spiritual awakening around my body
Mhm.
began, because I did every like Western medicine test known to man. They gave me all the blood work, all the things to try to figure out what was wrong with me, what was causing this pain. And after months, like they were like, we have no more tests. Like, you're fine. Like, we don't know what to do. But it was very clearly not fine because I was in pain every day. And that's when, a nurse had caught me, as she had gotten to know me because I was there all the time, and was like, hey, what's going on? And I told her, and she was like, I've been reading some more stuff about food allergies recently. And again, this is like early 2000s, right? 2008, 2009. So it wasn't like technology wasn't where is today, where they have like a bajillion different food allergy tests, right? So I went on my own journey of like researching what foods have common allergens, what foods are hard to digest. And it shifted this whole energy around the way I talked to my body, looked at my body. I also had started in moments of that, like just pain and desperation, laying in my bed, I began this practice kind of unconsciously of putting a hand on my heart, hand on my belly when I was in pain, and just being like, God, body, anyone, what can I do? Like, please tell me what to do and I'll do it. Cause I don't want to, I was scared. I didn't know what was going on. And between the two, I felt really just guided to eliminate all of these common allergens. I eliminated meat as well, even though meat's not a common allergen, because meat can be really hard if you're having sort of digestive issues. So I kind of eliminated anything that could aggravate it. And within a week, I felt like a whole new person after months of trying to figure out what was going on. And so that that was what kind of like kicked off this whole journey, because obviously that just kind of it went on and on and on, that journey. I kept on like experimenting, adding things back in. But one of the things that, by my senior year of college, a lot of my girlfriends in my sorority had seen this whole journey of mine and really started encouraging me to write about it and to share about not only the like healthy recipes I was making, because that was like, I was determined not to like miss out because of all these things I couldn't eat anymore. I didn't want to feel that like restriction that I had felt for so many years. And so I just found ways to make healthy alternatives of like my favorite comfort foods and stuff. So they're like, you got to share these recipes because they were my like test subjects for them. And they're like, you should share about this journey. And it became this really beautiful kind of just creative outlet for me while I was acting. Because as an actress, there's only like so much you can do. And now again, we live in a different world than it was back then where you could probably create your own vertical series or whatever. But like Instagram wasn't a thing back then. And so it was great to have this creative project that was fun and got my juices flowing and just was so, organic to who I was and what I was thinking about and, talking about every day anyway. And that's kind of how the whole journey began. And it was through sharing that on my blog, on YouTube, eventually on Instagram when that started existing, that, I had more and more women reaching out to me and saying, wow, I really relate to your journey. I relate, like, can you coach me? Can you work with me on this? Because I want this like freedom that you have. And that's kind of what started it all. And I
Mm.
just kind of rolled with it.
Yeah. I have a lot of similarities with your story, and I can totally relate to that. And you mentioned something that I found to be really interesting, which is this spiritual awakening with your body. And so, in kind of terms that anyone would be able to understand, what does that mean to you?
To me, it's a realization. Well, I think the first part of it is just like the willingness to want to communicate with your body and to have that moment where you're like, our body is always communicating with us, right?
Hmm.
But the awakening part of it, I think, is that moment where you decide you're willing to communicate with it. And I think sometimes, for people like me, we come to it from that like moment of desperation and nothing else has worked. And Western medicine or Eastern medicine and all the different people we've, consulted with don't have the answers that we finally realize we have to go to our own body. And it's been interesting for me, my relationship to what I like to call body wisdom in my book, and in my work in general is really just the divine wisdom that flows through our body, right? The reason that I don't just call it like, you know, talking to God or talking to your higher power is because to me, there is like a little bit of a difference as someone that like does all of it, right? Where your body has its own mechanisms for communication,
Mhm.
right? Like if you're receiving like what I like to call a divine download, you're in meditation and you kind of we all receive them in different ways. Like some people hear them. I will sometimes get images. Sometimes it's just a knowing. There are different ways that your higher self can communicate with you. When we're talking about body wisdom, the way I see it is that we are all manifestations of the divine, right? So we pick our earth suit, I like to call it, right? Because I think it just reminds you, this is your earth suit, right? You are spirit and matter. And we've decided to have these lovely bodies to play with in this life. And they're like our companion for this lifetime, our soul's companion, and then eventually we'll drop them off and we go. But while we're in them, they have their own mechanisms for communicating with us, their wisdom. And so your body communicates with you in so many different ways, whether it is, as like dramatic as you getting an allergic reaction, right? Or like having a lot of pain. But it can be as subtle as you being energized by something or you being slightly fatigued by something. And it could be the difference between you just like, some people you're with and you just like, you just like take a breath and you feel your whole body relax. And then other people can just like enter a room and you're like, "Whoop," like tight and like,
Yeah,
so
I think that this conversation is so important because we live in this world where we have such a lack of self trust that we're always looking at what is the quote unquote right thing to do? What should I be doing? And especially in the world of health and wellness. But even when it comes to, I mean, you can probably relate to this as a business owner. Everyone is always telling you what is the right way that you should be doing things and what is the right way that you should be living your life. And I know for me, I learned how to listen to my body as a result of an eating disorder. And I really had to go inwards and learn not what other people were telling me to do and avoid gluten, avoid this, but actually get curious about, well, what makes sense for me? And understanding that we all have this unique blueprint. And when we get so caught up in trying to do what someone else is doing and what's working for someone else, we end up slowing ourselves down and living a life that feels so out of alignment. Because, like you said, we came with this unique body, this unique code, and it's learning how to listen and live by that code that makes you feel alive and makes you feel like you are on your own path.
100, 100. And that's why, like, you know, whether it's the like right now, one of my favorite things to kind of pick on a little bit is the like protein craze, because everyone's like, eat a bajillion grams of protein
Yep.
and that will solve every problem you've ever had. But like you said, that is the same thing as like, here's the 3-step formula to go viral on Instagram, right?
Mhm.
They're just manifestations of the same thing. And you can't like, you can't hate the player, you gotta hate the game, right? Because it's like, I don't have any like animosity towards anyone that's sharing any of it, because I get it's coming from, I hope for most people, it's coming from this place of like, hey, for the protein stuff, there are some people that literally were, eating pretty atrociously, right? And then start focusing on protein and clean up their diet through that focus on protein. And it does work miracles for them, right?
Mm.
And so they're trying to share this thing that was a miracle in their life, right? So, of course, we get that, right? But also, it becomes really dangerous when, whether it's in food or exercise or business or love or whatever, you start giving your power away to all of those different things. And like what you said, coming back to that self-trust mechanism, because what I always say, even like with my clients, or like if, people that are doing my courses, I'm always like, listen, take what I say and like run it through your system, because I'm giving you like the best guidance I have. And because of that, like obviously you could probably tell just from like the book and our conversation thus far, I'm like a very different kind of coach, right? Where like I'm constantly bringing it back to like, let's ask your body. Okay, so you're having some headaches this week. Let's ask your body
Mhm.
what's going on, right? And of course, like, I'll get my intuitions and things about stuff, but I always be like, okay, run this through your system.
Mhm.
How does this feel to you? And I think whether we're talking about it from that aspect of like following some like mass marketed diet, it doesn't, especially if you're, let's say, reading a book or listening to a podcast by an expert, someone that has done research in this area, sees clients in some way or whatnot. It's not to say that like all the information is wrong, right? But it is to say, okay, let me check in with my body around that and ask myself, does that feel really good to me? And then I even talk about, in the book, that after we like, we also have this thing I call becoming a food detective, right? So it's like, okay, I also believe you can build self-trust through experimentation, right? Through being like, okay, well, my girlfriend is eating this like specific way and it's really working for her. She's really loving this type of workout. It's really working for her. Let me try it on for a week and see. You may not be able to see if you're going to get quote unquote results in a week, but you will 100% be able to tell in a week if it feels good to your body or not. Right.
Absolutely.
And I think it goes the same thing when it comes to, like you were saying, as a business owner, it's huge.
Mhm.
I think so much of how they teach business and social media and marketing is so backwards, because they're telling us this. And again, it's like, well-intentioned, I think, but backwards, where you're like asking yourself, before we got on the podcast, one of the things I said to Sabrina was like, ask the questions that you're interesting to you, because it'll end up being the best podcast. And that's something that I learned for myself,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was always so cognizant of, on my podcast being like, what does my audience want to know? What does my audience like think about this, right? And then I remember at one point just being like, no, my audience wants to know when I'm lit up, when I'm engaged, when I'm curious about having a conversation, that's when they're like, wow, that was so juicy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And same thing when it goes to when we're thinking about, when I've launched courses in the past or books or whatever it is, right? Your Instagram strategy. It's like, what lights you up? What feels good? Because then we get right now, I think, and I won't go farther on this tangent unless you want to, but I think we're seeing an epidemic of especially female business owners that like went their own way, started their own thing to like not be as burnt out as they were and, in corporate or working for someone else. And then essentially, instead of like designing their business around them, design their business around what they thought would sell
Yeah.
or what they thought would work. And then you're feeling depleted, you're feeling exhausted. You can try to work smarter, you can try to cut your hours, you can try to ninja all these different things, get more help, get more childcare. But at the end of the day, if you're constantly interacting with something that's not aligned with your soul, that's not actually giving you energy, that doesn't actually feel good,
Yeah.
just not going to work.
And it's so tough because I remember, I think it was about 3 years ago, I started working more deeply with some of my coaches on developing my intuition more. I grew up in a family, accountants, very logical minded, not at all talking about intuition or any kind of like higher vision, none of that. And so I was surrounded by people who would get all of these intuitive signals and who would have all of these gifts. And I thought, I don't even think, number one, that I have this ability. And I don't see how I could ever get there. And it made me realize, especially in the first couple of months, that I was so untrained in asking myself questions. I had become so trained at just doing what I thought was the right thing to do that any signals from my body, it wasn't even a thought to like go inwards and see, well, how does this feel for me? And I remember thinking being so silly because I was like, I do this with food. I do this with exercise. I do this with self-care. How have I not been doing this with those everyday decisions? And for anyone who's like hearing this conversation, most of my listeners are at that first stage of like, starting to ask themselves those questions around food and around exercise and around self care. And so it really is training yourself because at first, it's not going to be something that you're used to doing. And it does feel frustrating because sometimes you're like, I don't know what these signals are telling me.
Yes. And that's why I think that body wisdom and like the practices that I talk about are a good like entry point for people, because I think there's a, a little less subtlety, right? That like just purely listening to your intuition. Yeah, it is. It's like a muscle and you have to like practice it. And I actually have, just while I remember it, we'll put it in the show notes, but on my book bonus page for the Mindful Table, I have 2 guided meditations. One is a guided meditation to tune into your body wisdom around the best like food, movement, self-care for your body. And then the other one is about these yes or no daily choices and business, and could it be business, could be anything. And a couple of the practices that I think are also great for starting out is a simple the body wisdom of using yourself as a pendulum. So you stand up, put your hands on your heart, and think about whatever that thing is, right? So maybe it's like I go to the event tonight, right? That I got invited to. And then you relax, think about that event, think about being at that event, and notice if your body leans forward or it leans backwards. It is amazing how well this works. And if you want to double check it, if you're like, then you can do the reverse of it. You can be like, okay, let me think about not going to that event tonight. I don't go to the event. I take a bath instead. I read my book. And if you lean forward, your body's saying yes. It's like leaning into it, right? And leaning backwards is the no. And that's one of my favorite super simple checkpoints, right? And it's a great checkpoint sometimes to do even like to this day for certain decisions. I'll do it after I've gotten the intuitive message that I think of what I'm going to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, let me just double check. Because there have been times in the past, this one story, I was in New York. I was doing this a lot. It was when my first book had come out. This current book, The Mindful Table, is my fourth book. So it was my first book that came out. It was raining, it was cold, it was a winter, and I was getting invited to a ton of different events. I had like kind of just popped up on the scene and now I was like, ooh, and so there was like that temptation to just go to everything because I felt so excited because nobody had ever invited me to anything before, right? And it was wearing me out. I was like, this is not me. I am not a social butterfly. And I like to like take my bath and read my book and go to bed. I'm not a late night girl. But I wanted to, I wanted to go to the ones that were important, right? But how do you know that without checking in with your intuition? So that became my project. My project was like, okay, I'm going to use this tool every single time I get invited to an event. So coming thing, I got my green juice here and my tea. So I'm checking in with myself. And I remember it was this one event and I get a yes, even though like, intellectually I was kind of like a no, right? But I get a yes. And so I was like, it's rare that I was like, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go for whatever reason. I'm getting a yes. And I promised myself in this experiment that I would listen either way, whatever the body said, right? I go to this event. It's raining. There's 5 people there. I'm like, body got this one.
Yeah, you're like this.
Body got this one way wrong. What was I doing? But I'm like, okay, I'm already here. I paid for my taxi or whatever. I chat up with all the women there. I mean, they were lovely, whatever. But I was like, I left the event and I remember being like, well, that was stupid. But part of what I recommend when you're doing these kinds of experiments, and I invite any of your listeners to do this if they want to build this muscle, is keep a journal of it, right? So as you're doing these things, keep a journal and be like, okay, body said yes to whatever, whether it's an event, whether it's like a smoothie, body said no to this. Keep a journal so that you can then go back and like check. So not even like a week later, maybe it was a week or two, I can't remember, around a week later, I get this random call from someone I've never met. And they're like, hey, it's so-and-so. I'm at Shape Magazine and we'd like you to do like a 10 episode series, like healthy cooking series based on your book that just came out. And I was like, oh my God, of course. And they offered me a very nice amount of money for it. And I remember like talking through it and she was like giving me all these things. She's like, okay, da, da, da. And then at the end of the call, I was like, I apologize, but I'm just curious, like, how did you find out about me? And she was like, oh, I'm actually friends with so-and-so who met you at this like event on this, like, she was saying there's only 5 people there, but like you were amazing and she really connected with you. And she was like, oh, you need to hire this girl for this. And that story. And I met my first literary agent in a very similar way doing this stuff. And so I think when you talk about like building self-trust, to bring it back, that's how you build like really grounded trust in your intuition. I think is through allowing yourself to lean into it and trust it in these, what I would call like rather inconsequential choices, right? Like at the end of the day, worst thing that could happen was that I went out in the rain and spent some money on a cab or whatever, right? Or I didn't. And if we allow ourselves to lean in on these choices, and even if it's as simple as being like, okay, another like easy one I like is you're at like the deli or wherever, like the sandwich shop you get your lunch at typically, and you're looking at the menu options and you like pick 2 different options. Maybe you're like, okay, intellectually, I'm like, I should get the salad. And then you're like, but emotionally, I want the sandwich or whatever. And then you just check in with your body and think, okay, how am I thing that, and you can do like, you don't have to do the pendulum if you don't want to. You can also just visualize it
Mm-hmm.
and like imagine yourself eating that sandwich and notice. It's like a slightly higher level of, I guess, discernment, but you just notice again, how does that feel in my body? Do I feel relaxed? Does it feel expansive? Do I feel energized even at the idea of eating that sandwich? Right. And then how does it feel in my body with the salad? Does it feel contractive? Does it feel expansive? What are those feelings? And then you make the choice that you think based on the information you received. And then just notice,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just notice, okay, well, I chose the salad, even though emotionally I was kind of feeling the sandwich or whatever, because when I did the visualization, I felt like if I had the sandwich, I was going to be really tired for my like 2 p.m. call.
Mm.
Okay. And then I notice I'm on my 2 p.m. call and I have great energy because I chose you, right? So sometimes it's like we actually need to see a little bit of the proof in the pudding. And then that builds that self-trust so that when those like bigger decisions come and you're like, do I leave this job? Do I get out of this relationship? Do I move across the country? Right? Like when we're like, oh, these are like no joke ones, you can really lean into that intuition too around it because you've built that, not only the muscle, but also the trust in it.
Yeah. Oh my God. So many good points that I want to like mentally highlight. The first one is yes, it's practicing in those small daily choices that won't make or break you. And I know that when you're struggling with food and with disordered eating, these choices feel so big. Like we feel like if we pick the sandwich, then our entire life is going to fall apart. But that ends up stopping us from building up that evidence of, oh my God, when I eat more, for example, I just recorded a podcast on the fear of eating more. When I eat more, I have more energy. I think more clearly. I don't binge as much. And so it's like allowing yourself to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to make a decision that you're like, oh, I thought that was my intuition. And for me, I know that something that was really hard was determining the difference between anxiety and intuition, right? Like, oh, is it that I actually want to have that salad? Or is it that I feel like I should be having that salad? And so for anyone who's like, well, I'm so anxious around food, and every decision triggers this like fight or flight or this second guessing, is there anything that they can do to start discerning the difference between true intuition and anxiety?
Yeah. First of all, just as a reference point, they feel really different in your body, right? So anxiety lives kind of like above your, like around in your like upper chest, right? Chest to like throat area is often where anxiety is like living in like our head, right? Our intuition usually lives a little bit lower. And the energy in which you receive the intuition is almost like the difference between someone being like, go to bed early tonight, right? And like, you need to go to bed early tonight because you're not going to wake up. And then if you miss the flight and then, right? So it's like one of the two tools. So one tool that I like to do is give names to the voices in your head, which I think people get scared of because they're like, oh, that means I'm crazy. It doesn't mean you're crazy. We all know that it's like there's a big difference between being schizophrenic and we all have thoughts in our head, right?
Right.
But when we give voices to the anxious one, the disordered one, the nasty one, right? And sometimes they're all like the same one, really. Then you can identify and talk back, right? It separates it from the self. So in that moment, you can, like, for instance, mine is called Edith. And so, if I'm in that, if like Edith is like running a racket and is like, you haven't been to spin class in a week, like you need to get to spin class, right? I can be like, Edith, like, can you pause? Because I need to check in with my body because I'm still getting over this cold and I want to see if that's really in my highest good. Because I can easily hop on the Edith train and be like, I'm going to go to spin class, right? But if I check in with my body and just like be like, hey, are you ready to go to spin class? Because if you're not, I'm just going to get sicker and like delay my healing. And it's not worth it, whatever. It helps because then you start separating that version of you from your intuition,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you kind of know, it's like, I call it the nasty roommate because it has a personality. it has a personality and you've known it well. It's probably been there most of your life. And it's often not nice,
Yeah.
right? It's often not nice. It's often, like you said, full of shoulds, right? Like you should do this, you should do that. That's the thing. And so that practice I find is really helpful because as you start doing it, you start being able to discern more and more the difference between like what is your mean roommate voice and like what is like the true voice of you,
Hmm.
which will be your intuition. And then the other thing that I do for if you are experiencing a lot of food anxiety in that moment is I love to create a meal agenda for the day the night before. So this is something that really helped me in my journey because when you're in that like heated moment of like, it's breakfast time, it's lunchtime, like I'm at the restaurant, I need to make the call. Our anxiety is so high when we already have food noise, right?
Hmm.
If we do it the night before, most often, most of us know, give or take, our agenda for the very next day. We've already had dinner. I usually do it like on a full stomach after dinner. So you've got no like hunger messing with you. And just go through your day and you can still do that intuitive mood with it and be like, okay, what are my options for breakfast? Okay, well, my option is whatever. I have a banana at home that I can grab on the way to work, or I can, stop at the bagel store, whatever it is, right? Think about your realistic morning if you're running out and realistic options and just tune in. What's going to feel better for me? Can I imagine tomorrow morning? Am I going to feel better grabbing that banana or whatever? And I give those two examples because sometimes the two examples you're giving with are not perfect examples. They're just life things that are going to actually, so maybe in your head, you're like, well, in an ideal world, I wake up and there's like a fruit bowl and oatmeal prepared, right? But that's not actually what's going to be available to you the next day. So it's thinking about, okay, well, within the what I have available, what can I choose? Planning that the night before. Same thing with lunch and dinner. And if you're going to a place, going out, taking that time, looking at the menu if you haven't been there before, and tuning in and writing it all out, your choices, so that by the time you're in the moment, you've already made the choice.
Hmm.
And you can just activate on that choice. You'll still get the same information if you do it the night before.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one thing that I learned as I honed in my intuition is understanding how different people's intuition speaks to them. I don't know if you know anything about human design.
I do. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a manifesting generator and I really need choices. And so whenever Luke, my boyfriend, is like, babe, what do you want to eat for dinner? I'm like, that is not the question that you want to be asking me. Do you want to give me two options? Do you want pizza or do you want sushi? And that I can instantly know, no, I want pizza, or no, I want sushi, or I need something to respond to. I need pictures. I need a menu. And so what I love is bringing it back to everything is data and everything is patterns. And the more you can start listening and saying, okay, how did that feel? And what works for me? And what are some of the choices that I made that really did feel like intuition versus no, afterwards realizing, no, that was definitely anxiety. Like my anxiety speaks quickly. It speaks in like you said, it's kind of like yelling at me. And I remember once I was on the subway and I started feeling really anxious and telling Luke, I think someone is on this subway and is going to hurt people. And it was pure anxiety. Like it was not based in facts. It was like, you need to get off of the subway right now. Like it was very, very intense. And so I got off of it. And afterwards, I told Luke, I was like, that was not my intuition. Like, I can very much tell the difference. And so all of those experiences actually end up becoming data in your tool belt so that you can use it for future decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's like not being afraid. It's like, hey, you got off the subway. No big deal. Right. And then in hindsight, when you calm down, you're able to be like, okay, maybe that wasn't how that would go.
Hmm.
Right. But yeah, I think you can't be afraid to make the wrong choice. Right. And it's like, I think that was also how coming at this and like having that that experience when I was first trying, when you eliminate all these things for like allergies, right? And then you start trying to add them back in as part of the process, there's going to be things that don't go well, right? And I think when you get comfortable with that and you just, again, like you just find that as data and be like, okay, next time. But I think it's really the willingness, right? It's like the willingness to enter into the conversation, the willingness to be like, I want to work on my intuition. I want to hear it more. That sometimes we need. I actually had a podcast where I was talking with a friend who's an author, Athena Laz, and we were talking about the times in our life where we didn't listen to our intuition. And we both had like really, really sad, painful experiences when like eerily similar at times where we didn't listen to our intuition and it truly cost us. But at the end of it, when we were, as we were discussing it, it's those moments, even those moments that like I would give anything to be able to like go back and make a different choice in. It's those moments that are probably why I listen to my intuition so much right now. Right. So even sometimes you're like, wow, I made a really wrong choice. And it's always in hindsight too, that then you look back the same way you looked back down that subway and was like, I was in anxiety. You'll have those moments where you look back and maybe it's that day, maybe it's months later, and you're like, that was my intuition. And that's how it spoke to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't listen,
Yeah.
And they do, like, ultimately they're all, you know, they're all just part of it and they help us get on track sometimes even more than the wins, right?
Yeah. And I love to look back on those moments, those big moments, like starting my business, which made no logical sense. And then there was just that intuition and being able to look back and be like, all of those times where I trusted my intuition, even though I was scared as hell, led me to here. And so I find that when I'm making big decisions, that always proves to be really helpful.
Oh my God. In my business, I remember I did like a business mastermind or whatnot a few years ago. And I remember like some of the girls asking me like, what do I feel like my best like strategies have been or whatever for success? And I was like, honestly, every strategy that I felt like really worked it was always something that came straight from my intuition, that came through like after meditation. Most of the time didn't make a whole lot of logical sense. And I just allowed myself to suspend my disbelief long enough to go with it
Mm-hmm.
and to be like, I'm going to do it and we'll see what happens. I think that has been like one of the coolest proofs in the pudding, right? About being like, wow, historically, every like big win I've had business wise always came from a really, really divinely guided place.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, whether it's these small daily choices around self-care and movement and food or big decisions around career and relationships, they're all linked and they're all connected. And so for anyone who is listening to this and maybe they're more wanting to learn their body's wisdom around those things related to their health and well-being, what would you say is like a really great place to start for them?
Yeah. So I think, first off, I think it's starting that communication with your body, opening that up. And that can be as simple as sitting with your body or laying with your body and just starting to talk to it. I always think that it's nice to start off with an apology for the ways that we've mistreated it, we've not listened to it in the past. And I find the body is always very forgiving and you'll feel that relief once you kind of just like get it out, and then going into asking like, okay, well, what are you recommending for me right now? Like, what foods would you like to nourish me? What movement works? And just beginning that as like a daily conversation. Because I like to describe it as, think about a friend that you haven't talked to in 5 years and you want to start rekindling that relationship. Like, you're probably going to have to talk, a few times before you really get in that rapport again.
Mhm.
And the body is there and it's willing and it wants to connect, but you're going to have to like strengthen that communication level. And so I would make that a daily practice of connecting to your body, showing gratitude for it, apologizing in any ways in the past you've abused it or misused it, and then asking for its guidance and then listening. The body is not, when you listen to like a podcast or, an audiobook or something like on like a new like program or whatever, it can be really overwhelming. Your body is never going to give you that kind of information.
Mhm.
It's always going to be really simple. And it will like progressively say, I mean, it might just be something as simple as like more greens, right? And so you're like, okay, let me just start focusing on that. Can I add in more greens to at least one meal of my day, right? And then same thing when you tap into self-care, it might say more sleep, or that you might get an intuition that like your CrossFit routine is like really stressing your body out right now and it wants a week off,
Yeah.
or wants you to like switch to Pilates or yoga to go gentle for a week. And so I would first off just start engaging with it on a daily basis,
Mhm.
because that's the other part. We talked about bio individuality before briefly, about how like we're all different. And so these like generalizations around nutrition and food and exercise are often generalizations, and they don't always work for our unique bodies. But there's also a level of individuality that comes with like timing, right? Like the day to day we shift, as both of us as females who have our cycles, right? Every week of our cycle our body has different needs. It has different food needs. It has different exercise needs. It has different rest needs. And when you begin that like daily conversation, then you start to be able to also tune into that uniqueness,
Mhm.
right? You start learning, okay, well, when even to the thing of like, let's say you just have a really stressful week, your body's going to need different things that week than it would on like a normal week. The past week, my son, who was 18 months, was sick. And so I was getting like broken sleep and like half got sick from him or whatnot. And I've been drinking green juice like every day, because my body was like green juice, green juice, green juice, green juice, green juice. Now, before that, I hadn't drank green juice for a really long time, actually, probably like at least 6 months or something, because we're in winter. Even though I'm in California, we're in winter, and like green juice is usually not like on my agenda in the winter months. But my body was craving it because it knew I was in a vulnerable place. I wasn't getting enough sleep. There was nothing I could do about getting enough sleep, within reason, with, taking care of him. And it requested different things of me,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's one of the beautiful things that happens when you like engage on this journey, is that you start learning that like if you're able to tune in, then you'll be given specific guidance. And I'm sure like once I'm almost positive, I would bet on it, that once I'm at 100%, now that he is like starting to sleep again, thank the good Lord, um, the green juice will fall away.
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm like, wow, I'm really enjoying it right now. And it's kind of kept me going. But it's like little things like that. And also just like honoring that season, that I think doing it on a daily basis is so key. Like, don't wait until you're feeling crappy. Don't, do it once a month and then just think that that's it. It's like just tuning in so that you start building that muscle of communicating. And I really believe the body is so brilliant that it drips us out in little doses. It,
Yeah.
it gives us just like one little thing, like, hey, you're feeling really ungrounded and anxious this week. You need to eat a potato at least once a day,
Yeah.
right? Like, let's get some grounding root vegetables in. And then you're like, wow, I made myself a sweet potato or a baked potato or whatever with dinner, and I'm feeling less anxious tonight and I'm going to sleep better. It's
Mhm.
truly amazing. But again, it goes back to that self trust, right? It's entering that conversation and being willing to listen. And then, like I talked about with the food mood journal too,
Yeah.
if someone prefers that, then that's another way you can go about it. Don't change anything you're doing, but just start writing down everything you're doing and observing how you're feeling afterwards, so that then you can kind of fact find through your own evidence and look back and say, every time I tend to eat this at 3 p.m., I can barely function till dinner or whatever, right?
Mm,
And then you start again making those connections and building that
yeah.
trust.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned that what's working for you now won't necessarily be what you need 3 months from now, 3 days from now, 3 weeks from now. And especially when you have that lack of self-trust, it's very easy to get caught up in, well, this is what I've always done. This is what has worked for me. And so I'm not going to deviate from that. And I used to wake up at 6 a.m. for years and years and years. And then in December, I was a corpse and I was tired all the time. And I tuned inwards and I was like, I think I need to sleep longer in the morning. And so I experimented, like we talked about. I was like, I'm going to try 6:30 and see how that goes. And I feel like a completely different person. And I'm like, maybe I'll go back to 6 a.m. in the summer, maybe not. And so being able to move in cycles is really important as well. You have a new book that has already come out,
Yeah,
correct?
it's out. Yep.
Okay, so where can people find your book? And oh, beautiful. So tell us a bit more about your book and where people can find it and get their hands on it.
Yeah. So it's called The Mindful Table, and it has recipes, but the whole front part of the book goes through what we were talking about. All of the, like, defining how to connect to your body. It goes through what I call the 4 pillars of eating with intention. So the, like, releasing that negative noise, like calling out that roommate, becoming a food detective, really rekindling that relationship with your body, and then falling back in love with food and cooking and that. And then all of the recipes. So all the recipes in here are plant-based, and they all have a mantra and a meditation with them. And so one of the things I love is that you can kind of use it as an oracle deck too if you want. So if you're like, wow, I'm like really craving this chia seed pudding for breakfast, you can then go look at the mantra and the meditation of like, what might I be craving as well? And this one is a self-love meditation. And the mantra is, my life is a reflection of how sweet I am to myself. And so you can also have fun and do it the opposite way, where you just like kind of pick one and say, like, what do I need to hear? This one I just picked. So this is for all of you listeners. This is the message you needed to hear today. Comes with my shaved Brussels sprout salad, which is one of my fave salads.
Delish.
But the mantra is, I release my excuses and I step into my power.
Love.
So yeah, it says
Someone out there needed to hear that today.
Yeah, right? Your excuses are weighing you down, but at any moment you can just decide to step into your power. And there's a meditation for releasing excuses. So it kind of goes along with everything we were talking about today with the spiritual mind, body, soul connection around food. And you can get it wherever books are sold. We'll put the link below if you want to get those book bonuses. It's just CassandraBodziak.com/the mindful table. And you can get access to those 2 guided meditations. And then I also gave you bonus audio chapters of the book. So the front matter of the book, we really dive into all this stuff. It's extended. I riff on, like you were talking about, more into like my postpartum journey and more recent stories as well that have come up. So if this is the conversation for you, you'll definitely love those audio chapters too.
Amazing. It's a beautiful book. So go check it out. And I love how it blends like meditation, and then you've got recipes, you've got all of this knowledge around listening to your body. So just so cool. Thank you so much for being here. This was so, so lovely.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a pleasure. It was great to talk to you.
It was great to talk to you too. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you found it valuable, I would love if you would share it with someone you know that could benefit. If you're loving the show, don't forget to subscribe over on Apple Podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. I really love hearing feedback from you, so please leave a rating and review over on Apple to help us get in the ears of more people who need it the most. Finally, come hang out with me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health for more educational content and get up close and personal with me. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you on the next episode.